Please listen carefully.
Well, hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Kristy Jansen.
And I'm Summers McKay.
We're part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help make it one focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels.
Also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy
podcast. Today is Thursday, the 10th of June, 2021. Hello, Kristy. Hello, world. How are you today?
I'm just fine and dandy, hanging in there. It's another day.
Are you guys still in June gloom in California?
It's gotten a little bit brighter the last day or so, and I don't know. I don't mind having damp mornings.
Right.
Kind of cozy.
Yeah.
And then it clears up, and it's gorgeous afternoons. So.
Well, as you know, I've been trying to get meditation back into my life and back into my practice, but I have figured out what is like the working mom meditation, and it involves right after drop-off, the 15 minutes you sit in your car before you scurry off to the next thing. So you drop your kid off at school and you have 15 minutes. And during that time, I've taken to looking on social media for things that inspire me, because I've very carefully curated my list after we last had that article about choosing who you follow and who follows you. And this morning, one of the things that inspired me was this beautiful overhead picture of a drone flying through and seeing the lovely coast of Ventura and Santa Barbara. For just a brief and fleeting moment, I felt that I was next to you on the coast in Santa Barbara, and that was part of my little care of self practice this morning. So just so you know, even though I'm all the way across the country here, I'm still envisioning myself next to the coast of California with you.
So. Love it. Okay. Wonderful.
So speaking of morning rituals and getting yourself to work, and how is it going getting back to the office on a regular basis? Are you settling into a good cadence?
Well, I have to say I really enjoy going to work because there's something about being in an area which is not, don't have to worry about anything in my house. I don't have to worry about laundry or dishes to put away, and also I can't use those as excuses. So when I'm here, I'm just focused on working. But I do like having a little bit more flexibility, so I can work from my home office now. But it's taking some time. This morning I had a conversation about opening up our office. Not everybody's here, and who's answering the phones, and how are we going to answer the phones in a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's just, we're still working out the kinks.
Working out the kinks of this new back to better. Well, and that's like really what we have to do in this world as we move forward. There's going to be tweaks and changes and things we have to do differently to make it more productive for everyone. And that's what we do with the Optimist Daily, right? We're looking for solutions, tweaks, and changes to some of these really, really big problems. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're talking about today, right? We have some interesting guests. We're not going to talk about just today's headlines.
I'm so excited about our show today, because we are talking with our friend Stacey Colino and her new co-author, Swan, about their new book. And Stacey, you guys may remember, is a co-author on a book that we did a feature on last August, and then we teamed up with Stacey and her co-author for that on emotional inflammation. That was Lisa Van Susteren. And now she's got a new project with Swan. And the book is called Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race.
Yikes.
And, I know, it's a little bit shocking, but it's true. And it's not something we think about that often in relation to our reproductive lives. And this book, I'll just read a little tiny blurb, and then we'll bring on Shanna and Stacey. But in the tradition of Silent Spring and the Sixth Extinction, an urgent, meticulously researched and groundbreaking book about the ways in which chemicals in the modern environment are changing and endangering human sexuality and fertility on the grandest scale, from renowned epidemiologist Swan. And that is our show today. We're going to be talking with Shanna and Stacey, and welcome you guys. Are you on the line here?
Yeah, right here and ready to talk to you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I've been reading the book, and it's kind of a wake-up call to me because it's not something that I've been thinking about in this way. So I would love for you to tell me a little bit about how you guys got to know each other and how this project was born.
Conceived and born, right?
Conceived and born, yes.
That's right.
So, Countdown is the first book that I've written, certainly not the first book that Stacey's written. And after I published a paper that kind of went viral in 2017, an agent came to me and she said, "Would you like to write a book about this?" That paper had announced that sperm count had dropped dramatically in the 40 years prior, and that had implications for lots of things, which we'll talk about. But when my agent, turned out to be Jane, asked whether I would write a book, I was kind of negative because I'm an academic and I've written over 200 papers and I've given God knows how many talks in scientific conferences. So I felt like that was my milieu. That was my audience. That's where I spoke. But then she began talking about the impacts and, what the book could do. And she convinced me that writing the book would be a good thing. And it's not for me about the book. It's about getting the message out and bringing change that I think is imperative at this point. So she said to me I needed to write this. She suggested I write this with somebody. And of course I felt I did need to because I have the voice of an academic. And this is a book that has to be heard by everybody. And so she suggested, actually, before she suggested some names, I remembered that I had a wonderful interview with a journalist being interviewed about this study that had been published in 2017. And that interviewer was particularly probing and sensitive. And I really thought she would be a great fit. And that's Stacey. Long story short, we considered other writers, and Jane and I both felt that Stacey was the number one choice. You take it from there, Stacey. How did it seem from your end?
Okay. Yeah, so Shanna and I decided to write this book together, and it was an amazing experience because, as Shanna has begun to describe, she has a very research-oriented, somewhat academic orientation, and I have been writing for the masses my entire career. So it was kind of a bridging of two worlds and a bridging of two voices. Fortunately, we share similar senses of humor. Shanna has a wonderful sense of humor. And so we infused the text with little snippets of humor and pop culture references and that kind of thing. And this was just an extraordinary project. I have spent a lot of my career writing about women's reproductive health, not very much about men's reproductive health. So I learned an extraordinary amount of information that's really valuable that I am imparting to my two sons because they need to know and they need to take steps to protect their fertility.
That's one of the things that really stood out to me about this particular book is that it balances that out because fertility is sort of in our culture a domain of the female, but we all know it takes two, right?
Absolutely.
It takes two. And the thing that it seems has come out is that just sperm counts and the precipitous decline there, it really does threaten fertility across the board.
And as we will talk about, I'm sure, it's while sperm count has declined, yes, dramatically and importantly, we also write about and know about declines on the female side. So it's not just male fertility that's gone down. And fertility, by the way, is a couple process. So talking about male and female infertility is a little odd in a way because fertility is really what happens when those two sides come together. But right. You can have limitations on the male side, limitations on the female side. And what we found and what I knew from my prior work was that these processes have been deteriorating, if you will, over time. So yes, this is very much a male and female book.
Right. So anyway, I appreciate the balancing there.
Yeah.
Well, and
I want to go back to what you were saying, though, because you're right. Like, traditionally, if a couple has trouble conceiving, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, what's wrong with her?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she having trouble getting pregnant? And the woman is sent for all these tests and measures and so on. And men are assumed to be fine. Because it's not as if men have, reproductive visits throughout their lives the way women do have visits to their OBGYNs. They don't get a baseline sperm count to know what's really going on. As I said, I have 2 sons, and even they have said, well, I'm fine, right? They know they can ejaculate, so they just assume they have plenty of sperm.
So I'm going to share probably TMI on this one, but when my husband and I were having trouble conceiving, we now have a 22-month-old little girl, but we, just as you guys described, I was sent for batteries and batteries and batteries of tests and this, and just like this very invasive and stressful experience. And nobody in the whole process asked my husband for any information. And so I went over the internet and bought an online sperm count test and made him do it at home, because there was so much like shame and embarrassment around the idea that it could have anything to do with him. And it was just such a bizarre experience because, you know, it turned out that our timing just wasn't working right, and we just needed to relax a little bit and go on vacation, and bam, the baby came along. But it was just this crazy thing that there were so many resources directed at me, the mom to be, and that all of our insurance and everything was just like pushing in that direction, and nobody was talking to him. The evolution of this conversation is so important. You guys frame the problem through the perspective of what it is we're around and the environment we're in every single day. What's going on from that front that we need to know?
Well, you know, it's what's going on around us every single day, which I'll go into in a minute, and Stacey will go into. But it's also what was going on around our mom when she was pregnant with us, and around our dad prior to the time that he conceived us. Because it turns out that the things in our environment today that are stressful for our reproductive system were also stressful at those times, and the damage that they caused when we were in utero are much more severe and permanent. So there's really kind of 2 levels here. What was messed up, if you will, when we were in utero, which we can't, by the way, do anything about now. So there's no optimism about that because that is permanent. And then there's things that are going on today that can affect our reproductive health, or for a couple that's trying to get pregnant, can affect the health of their subsequent generation. So those are good things. Those are things we can change. But I just want to point out that, you know, it's kind of a bad news, good news story, because the biggest impacts are those that occurred in utero. And they were impacts from chemicals that our mother or father were exposed to when the mother was pregnant, or the father was, you know, just before conception, making sperm that would produce us, you know, and chemicals that they were exposed to in their daily lives, in their foods and in their personal care products and in the dust that they were exposed to. All of those things have the ability to actually alter, and this is so mind-blowing, how we developed at the point when we were maybe just a very few cells in utero. So that's how sensitive that early fetus is. So I would say, if I had one message, it would be, if you're trying to become pregnant or are in early pregnancy, then be extra careful, because everything you do is going to have implications for your child and actually your child's child.
Well, and I think that's so interesting to think about. And you, Shanna, you said you've been an academic for a long time. You've written hundreds of papers on this, but your audience has been other academics.
Yes.
And to come out now with this kind of a tool, which opens eyes, because I feel like my eyes have been open to all of the things that are in my home, all of the things that are on my desk.
Great.
That I'm around every single moment, and that my children are around, and that, you know, if you think about the last 50 years with the industrialization of our or 70 years, I don't know, of our food systems, our construction in our homes, and realizing how detrimental that can be. I feel like this is super important and super timely. We don't have time to lose here, right?
Right.
And then also I appreciate you talking about the intergenerational transmission of these and how it affects our offspring.
Yeah. Yep.
So why don't you frame the problem? Because we've been talking about it at sort of this 30,000 foot level, but why don't you guys sort of explain what is the
crisis? What is the crisis?
What's the crisis?
The crisis is that reproductive health on the planet, men, women, and other species, is in severe trouble, largely due to chemicals in the environment that are impossible to escape. That, I would say, is the overarching view of the problem. I don't know, Stacey, maybe you want to dive in more?
Sure. So I would agree with that. I think that there's also a companion problem that's present, and these two sort of buckets can have an additive effect or a magnifying effect on each other. And the other bucket is our lifestyle. It's no secret that we're in the midst of an obesity epidemic, and obesity can have detrimental effects on fertility for both men and women. Smoking is a very big problem as far as fertility is concerned. It affects sperm counts as well as a woman's fertility. Binge drinking. It's no secret that during the pandemic, a lot of people have been drinking more alcohol. It'll be interesting to see how the fallout comes from that afterwards, because drinking too much can impair fertility, as can other practices such as drug use and so on. So these are two sets of problems that exist independently, but can also make each other worse. And they can take a toll on both male and female reproduction.
And maybe just to add one thing, which is that the chemicals that I'm so worried about that I spoke about first are most concerning if they have the ability to interfere with our body's hormones. Those are called the endocrine disruptors. And it turns out that some of those lifestyle factors also have endocrine disrupting effects. For example, stress is an endocrine disruptor. It actually alters androgen levels. So Stacey's right. These are two sets of reasons we're having problems, but they are interdependent as well. And they can both, sets of these can affect the development both prenatally and in childhood and adult life. Right. So they're lifetime risks, if you will.
So what are some of those main chemicals, Shanna, that you've identified?
Well, can we jump in first and talk a little bit about what endocrine disrupting chemicals?
Yeah, I was gonna. Yes, I think that's a great place to. What is the endocrine system, and what does that mean?
So the endocrine system, endocrines are signals that our body passes from one organ to another, if you will, that gives instructions on how to carry out development and function. And the ones that we're most concerned about in terms of reproductive health are those that everybody knows and cares about, which is their testosterone, their estrogen, and other steroid hormones, right? And women know about the hormones of their menstrual cycle, and I think people are pretty aware of these. So these endocrine disrupting chemicals, those are man-made chemicals that can trick the body into thinking they are the natural hormones. They're imposters, if you will. They sneak in at low levels, under the radar. They're not seen. We have no awareness of them because you don't know what's in your body in terms of endocrine disruptors. I don't either. We have to take our urine and send it to the Centers for Disease Control to find out. So they're secret. They're hidden. And what they can do is alter the way our body manufactures, stores, sends, uses hormones of various kinds. And like I say, the ones I care most about for reproduction are the androgens, testosterone particularly, and the estrogens. And so the chemicals that I'm most concerned about are those that can mess with those hormones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And is insulin also a hormone?
Yes.
Insulin. Because I was thinking about the lifestyle comment that Stacey made, and I think some of those lifestyle disorders are also linked to the endocrine.
Absolutely.
System.
Yes.
So in easy shorthand, endocrine disrupting chemicals is kind of a mouthful, and Shanna and I have come to appreciate a different phrase to describe them, which is basically they're hormone hijackers.
Yeah.
They get in the body and they basically hijack your hormones, or the way your body uses your natural hormones.
That's a very evocative phrase. I think that's fantastic. And this is why, Stacey, it's a great partnership with Shanna, because she's got this really dense research-based understanding of these systems and this problem. And then you can translate it into phrases that make us go, wait, that's happening to us. Our hormones are being hijacked.
Right. Exactly.
So this is a problem. And it certainly affects our fertility, which is clearly based to the female and male hormones. And it also other parts of our body. So what are the things that are most impactful in our environments that we can start looking at or avoiding or moving forward, getting rid of, both on a personal level and also a policy level?
Well, it's kind of an alphabet soup, but we don't have to name all the all the letters of the alphabet here, but we can just talk about maybe major classes, right? So one class is the phthalates, PHTHALATES. Terrible name. But it signifies chemicals that make plastic soft and flexible. That's one really important function of phthalates. They do other things. They help cosmetics be absorbed into your skin. They help retain color and scent for fragrances and nail polish and things like that. But the use that's people most concerned about, and I think is probably, soft plastics, which of course we see all the time. We can come back and talk about plastics some more after that. But so that's one class. And what they do is they lower testosterone. And that's so critical for reproductive development, particularly in males. We can come back to that. So another big class are the bisphenols, and they're sort of the, if you will, evil twin of the phthalates, because their phthalates make plastic soft and the bisphenols make plastic hard, right? So baby bottles, water bottles, and they're also in the lining of tin cans, and they're also in our cash register receipts, which is really surprising, and lots of other uses. And they are estrogenic. So they're kind of the sister, if you will, of the phthalates. And then everybody's aware of pesticides, and these can have a wide variety of hormonal action in the body. And then more recently, people are starting to study the chemicals that are basic barriers. So like a Teflon coating is a barrier, and a coating on a rain jacket, making it waterproof, is a barrier. And a barrier in a pizza box that keeps the oil from going through is a barrier. These are the PFAS chemicals, and they're really concerning and very hormonally active. And they actually, unlike the phthalates and the bisphenols, stay in the body much longer. So that's makes them more concerning. And then there's the flame retardants, which have been around for a long time in various forms, and they've been reworked and remodeled, but they're still not great for us. And they're in our furniture, in our cushions, and in our carpets, and in our clothes. So that's kind of the last big class that I'm going to mention.
Wow. My mind is kind of spinning all of those things.
Well, it seems like it's very difficult to avoid these things, right? And it seems that the problem, I get in trouble with our producer Amelia for overusing the word ubiquitous, but I feel like I might get a pass on this one. It seems like the problem is pretty ubiquitous, and the challenge is how we avoid them.
Yeah, we call them everyday, everywhere chemicals.
Okay. Yes.
Ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Sorry, Amelia. So the question that we would have at the Optimist Daily, right? The Optimist Daily perspective is, what are our solutions? And one of them you've touched upon, which is the importance of this intergenerational dialogue and discussion and awareness. And then, like, tactically, what do we do from here?
Well, the good news is there is actually quite a bit. The bad news is the onus is on us as individuals and consumers to take charge of this issue, because regulators are not and the government are not protecting us from these chemicals. So it shouldn't be that way. Ultimately, the long-term solution would be to have better testing, better chemical development, and better regulations. But in the meantime, we can all do a lot to protect ourselves from this. We can start by leading a healthy lifestyle, eating an unprocessed diet, exercising regularly, keeping our alcohol consumption in the moderate zone, avoiding smoking and use of illicit drugs and that kind of thing. And we can basically revamp our home environment, maybe our office environment as well, to get rid of some of these chemicals. I'll let Shanna jump in on some of those, but you can take a proactive approach.
And I like that you also said it's important for us to do it on an individual level, but really, if we could push back on up the food chain, so to speak, and start getting policy changes, and whether we're voting with our dollars and we get the big corporations to change their ways, or we vote with our ballots and actually ask for regulations to really fix some of these issues. So both of those. But Shanna, so tell us, what are the things we really should be avoiding?
So food. Food is a big concern. It's the source of many of these chemicals in our bodies. And so anytime a food is processed through a plastic tube or a surface that's covered with plastic, the plastic leaves that surface, that tube, and gets into the food, and then it gets into us. And there's a lot of evidence for that. So if you can buy unprocessed food, so much the better. I want to interject here something that we haven't talked about, but just to say that everybody is not equally at risk from these exposures. There really is an environmental justice component here, right? So people who have fewer resources, for example, in New York City where I live, there are many neighborhoods where there is not a grocery store within a mile that has fresh food and fruits and vegetables. And so I can recommend to the people, eat fresh carrots, eat fresh fruits and vegetables, but they can't buy it. And
Right.
there's also
the food deserts really come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when it comes to exposures, these same communities that have less access also have higher exposures. And we're finding that they're also more affected by an equal level of exposure because their body is already stressed. So like so many things, their impacts of risks are not equal across populations. So that said, if you can eat unprocessed food, eat organic food if you can find it and afford it. And if you want to get safer personal care products or cleaning products, you can read Countdown. We give you a lot of resources. And you can also go to various websites, such as Environmental Working Group, where you can put in the name of a product and say, is this a good product I just bought or I want to buy? And they have categories like sunscreen and cleaning products and laundry products, and you can find which ones will be the best choice for you. So product choice is important. And then things like dealing with dust. A lot of these things are in our dust. I just talked to somebody in Bosnia who was very upset because of the very high levels of air pollution there, and they're so worried about the chemicals they're breathing in, as they should be. But we all should be, because they're in our everyday indoor air as well as outdoor air. So to the extent that you can leave your shoes at the door, vacuum with a HEPA filter, have a good air exchange in your house if you can, you'll be protecting yourself better. So those are a few things that you can do.
I would also like to jump in and say that if there's another really important thing to do, it's to survey your home and get rid of as much plastic as you can, especially in the kitchen. And that's easier said than done because so much of our food is packaged in plastic. But you can get rid of plastic food containers and swap them for glass ones or ceramic or metal ones. Get rid of your plastic water bottle and get a metal one instead. Because as Shanna said, all of our food absorbs some plastic from the vehicle that it's packaged in. And you've probably heard that you should not microwave leftovers in plastic. That's a major no-no. one of the things that I did for our family after working on this book is I basically like clear cut a path through our kitchen and looked for things that were packaged in plastic and said, okay, let's swap this out. And to the point of not buying olive oil in a plastic bottle, go for glass. Similar with peanut butter. And these are particularly important because they have fat, which absorbs more of the chemicals in the packaging. So the first step is to really educate yourself about what you need to know, because we don't know what we don't know. And the book will help you do that. And then to take sort of baby steps in the right direction, because I'm not going to use the U word, but these problems are everywhere. And so you need to start with what you can manage and then build out from there.
Right. And I think that that's super important because, I mean, it's overwhelming. And if you think about all of the things that in my kitchen right now that are touching plastic, I don't know how I can totally get rid of it. But maybe there's like the dirty dozen, the things that really should be organic. And maybe there's the dirty dozen, the things that really you should never allow to have in plastic containers, like peanut butter, for example, or olive oil, if we can afford it. And I really like, Shanna, that you pointed out the environmental justice component of this, because that's something that I think it really is a problem. And as these effects are cumulative and, you have the air quality, and a lot of times like our power plants are going to be located in communities where there's a lower socioeconomic level, or communities of color where there's people have less political power, right? And then that just goes right on top of the food deserts, and that goes right on top of the fast food consumption, right? And all of these things, and cumulative, and it gets intergenerational. So really, while on an individual level we can take immediate action in our own lives, I think the answers really have to be systemic and at the governmental level.
Another thing we can do is we can pay attention in the news to companies that seem to be environmentally conscious. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to name brand names right now, but there are some very big companies that have made big efforts to clean up their act and to, use safer packaging and safer products. Defend Our Health is one nonprofit that's looking into this. So as I say, the book, we have a lot of resources. You can look at various companies and websites, but I mean, just have that lens, have that view that not all manufacturers, companies are equally aware of this or equally protective of our health. And we want to support the ones that are, right, with our dollars.
Yeah.
So make good choices.
I love that. A couple of things that I think one of the phrases that I wrote down from the book, the key to eating healthy is avoid any food that has a TV commercial.
Right. Right.
I love that.
Right.
And then and then I think you had a site called Detox Me.
Yes.
That could give you, and I think you can even send your urine away to them too. Anyway, you can do a test.
Yeah. So there's a lot of smart people working on this, but it's going to take some very basic changes because we're very addicted to these products.
Yeah.
They're part of our daily life and we really want them and probably need them at this point. And so what the chemists and the chemical companies and the chemists and the scientists have to do for us, they have to redesign the basic molecules that are going to produce safer plastics.
Right.
And then the government is going to have to do much better at testing them. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. I'm optimistic because I think we have much more energy behind us now. I think some of it generated by the book, some of it generated by just people realizing that by taking action of various kinds, which people have been doing in a lot of arenas now, right? In terms of green chemistry and in terms of, the Me Too movement. And so people are feeling their power, I think. And once you do that, you'll be able to make changes. And then maybe we'll see some changes in this area as well.
And why don't we follow up on what you just said there, Shanna? Because we like to end our interviews with the question for our guests. And I think I'd like to hear from each of you. What is making you optimistic right now? Where's your optimism being inspired at this moment?
Well, I think you just heard mine.
Okay.
I'm optimistic because I feel that people are listening. They're waking up. They're paying attention, which they didn't 20 years ago, believe me, because I've been writing about this for a very long time. And I feel a very different response. This podcast, for example, and podcasts and interviews I've been giving nonstop since the book came out are overwhelmingly make me optimistic because people are listening to me for the first time. And they're listening to scientists who are pointing out these dangers, and they're wanting to make change. And I think that once we, as a society and as humanity wants to make these changes, they will make it.
Stacey, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Two things. I agree with Shanna completely about the reception that this book has gotten. That's incredibly hope generating. The fact that people have really taken this message and kind of said, why haven't we been told about this before? Why don't we know this? And there's a level of outrage that's building, which is appropriate. And people are taking the messages to heart. And that makes me really happy. Along those lines, we've gotten a lot of documentary film interest for the book, which also shows just how powerfully the message is resonating. So that's all good. The other part of it that really makes me optimistic is, as you'll see in the book, or have seen in the book, is people can turn these problems around. We heard stories from people who, there was a study that we cited in the book of men who worked with pesticides, and relatively high percentage of them went down to zero sperm. Zero. And then within a few months of stopping working with pesticides, they got their sperm back. I went to a sperm bank in Philadelphia to interview the director as part of our research, and she told me some stories about some of their so-called regular donors who made changes in their lives, whether it was starting to live with a smoker or taking on a new job that was incredibly stressful, changing their diet in a negative direction, and the sperm quality went down. So they counseled these guys about what might be going on, sent them on their way. And among the ones that made healthy changes, they came back and their sperm in many instances was where it was before the not so healthy changes were made. That's incredibly optimistic. The fact that we can turn these things around gives me a lot of hope.
I think that is just such a perfect ending. And this is an intense conversation. And Shanna and Stacey, as you guys know, having the forum to listen and, to hear these sorts of challenges and the solutions are what are going to make this world a better place. And so we are really, really grateful for you joining us for the conversation today and this upcoming weekend. If you are an Optimist Daily emissary, you're going to read some selects from the book on The View. And we're just really, really grateful to have you here today and grateful for the work that you do. So thank you for coming to the Optimist Daily Update podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Here. All right, so I guess that's it today, Summers, right?
It is. Everybody, we'll just say thank you all for listening to the Optimist Daily Update. As you know, we promise to cover the current events with accuracy, legitimate sources, and offer you the information needed most to chart new paths for all of us. As always, please consider becoming an emissary on theoptimistdaily.com. Be part of the solution, changing consciousness and addressing our world's biggest challenges with a problem-solving mindset. Help us through reader-funded journalism. Keep the Optimist Daily free to all who need it, supported by those who can. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.